Hello and welcome into the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host TJ Mabarty. Happy Friday. We are coming to you live on August 9th, and yesterday we got a pair of really incredible international basketball games highlighted by an unbelievable comeback from Team USA to knock off Serbia and advance to the gold medal game. Was so much fun to watch. Want to talk about all of that. Additionally, along with the France versus Germany game, and preview a little bit what is to come this upcoming weekend in that gold medal game. So we are going to be diving into that. Additionally, we got two preseason games from the NFL last night. While yes, the stakes are pretty low in preseason games, I do think that there were a number of things to dive into. We got the debut of Drake May, very brief there, but the Patriots did end up rolling out a number of pretty significant players onto the field that I want to talk about that. Additionally, the Giants had a number of important pieces that were playing, and I especially want to look into their secondary, which I was very much impressed with, along with their running back room as well, considering they just lost Saquon Barkley, and there's a lot of question marks at that running back position, and they did pretty well for themselves last night. So we're going to dive into all of that as well, and then we are going to be finishing off the show with a preview of the upcoming season for the Washington Commanders as we close out our previews on the NFC East. So a whole lot to get into today, but before we do so, just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. To any of our viewers, be sure to use the comment section to give us your thoughts on the latest happenings in sports. If to prioritize your comments, be sure to use the super chat button. If you leave a tip or donation, your comment will pop up on screen for everyone to see, and as we try and make this show as interactive as possible. And if you would consider leaving a tip or donation, anything would be greatly appreciated there. The game yesterday, though, between the United States and Serbia in the semifinals of the 2024 Olympics was one for the ages, where we've been talking up this Team USA roster and talking about how it is one of the most talented groups we have seen in decades, possibly ever, but at least since the Dream Team, I would say. And they were on the ropes against Serbia yesterday, facing Nikola Jokic, and ultimately it took the absolute best of all of the top players of this past generation in the likes of LeBron, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid to be able to dig their way out of the hole that they were put into early on. And I guess it was a little naive of me to think that what we had been seeing from the US in these past few games, that they were just going to continue to roll and that they had put all of their issues behind them and they were going to cruise all the way throughout. That's not typically how this ends up working, and that was definitely the example that we got yesterday. And we talked about it just the other day as well, that in order for any team to have a chance of knocking off the US, they were going to have to be elite from the three-point line. And that's what Serbia was for the first three quarters of this game. 15 of 30 from three through the first three quarters. They led by as much as 17 points, and you have the three-point shot flowing along with having Nikola Jokic manning the middle for you. That is a little bit of a scary scene for any team, and that includes the United States, despite how talented they are. Now, we were sort of sitting around here waiting through these first handful of games to get the Steph Curry moment, and it finally arrived in a massive way yesterday. 36 points for Steph Curry, just 1 point short of the single game United States men's basketball record that Carmelo Anthony set in 2012, I believe it was, where he scored 37 points. Curry, 12 of 19 from the field, 9 of 14 from three, and he was really the reason why the Team USA was able to stick around as long as they were. He scored 14 of the US's first 15 points. He had 17 total in the first quarter. And again, you can definitely point to, I wouldn't say just Steph Curry, the defense in general with Team USA, this was a little bit of a low point for them. And Curry maybe deserves a little bit of responsibility there in terms of the defense, but I don't want that to take away from the unbelievable performance we had. And Steph Curry, I just think he is one of the most fun basketball players to watch when he is hitting offensively. There isn't a shot in the world that he can't hit. And he was also a massive part of the closing run as well, where sure, he did his damage early, but it's not like he burned out in that first quarter. He continued on from there and even scored 9 points in the fourth to help close this game out for Team USA. And it was just so incredible seeing him, Kevin Durant, and LeBron James all very likely in their final Olympics, and them just cooking at the end together. It was really an appreciate greatness moment where, along with Steph Curry, we saw Kevin Durant, who was maybe a little bit quiet for the first portion of this game. He only, I think, finished with 9 points in this ultimately, but he played down the stretch for the final stretch for the U.S., and he was unbelievable, hit some of the biggest shots of the game, including one of the threes on the 6-point play that happened around the 7-minute mark of the fourth quarter, which really turned around the entire shift in momentum, where he hit that first three, and then he also had the pull-up shot with under a minute left. That was one of the most prototypical Kevin Durant shots that I think you could have drawn up, where it's an off the dribble, just with that ridiculous wingspan, rising up over a defender that can only really dream of having a real impact on the shot. That's what Kevin Durant has been doing for years now, and it was just such a classic moment for KD. That ended up being the dagger during this game as well. Again, maybe a little bit quieter in terms of the overall scoring output, but he was able to surpass 500 career Olympic points, becoming the 8th player in Olympic history to do so. So quite the Olympic career for Kevin Durant, and the legacy isn't completely finished off just yet because they are moving on to the gold medal game, of course, to try and take home another one. But it was Curry, it was Durant, and of course it was LeBron James who recorded a triple-double in this game, 16 points, 10 assists, and 12 rebounds, and he was the initiator for most of the action down the stretch. And it's just kind of funny looking back at all of these false narratives that were thrown out there about LeBron and the lack of clutch ability there, and almost the fact that he has aged over the course of these years. He has gone a little bit less to being the physically dominant force that is going to be score first and get himself to the rim at will, while he obviously still can do that, and he did it a couple times in transition during this fourth quarter. It's just the IQ with him is so impressive, and he's just, a very, very overqualified point guard at this point in his career. He was setting up everything for Team USA, and it was just it was so cool to see, again, all three of these guys firing at the same time. But, the back-to-back transition layups from him and Steph Curry also felt pretty special. And it was just a ton of fun to watch all of these guys sort of coincide, and give credit to Joel Embiid as well, who has faced a ton of criticism throughout these Olympic Games, and he sort of fit in a perfect way to the system where, like I mentioned, LeBron was running the point guard, but everybody was involved, and everybody was involved with one another's plays, and it was just a gelling of Team USA that again, even though they were sort of dominating the past couple games, ended up beating Brazil by over 30. It was 2 straight 20-point wins beforehand. What you look at during the final stretch of this game and the cohesion with this group, including Joel Embiid, which I definitely had my concerns with him being able to play into a team system like that. All of it came together in an incredible way. And I definitely want to give Embiid his flowers for this performance, because I think that, when you look at his overall legacy up to this point, we know about the individual talent, but just objectively speaking, he hasn't necessarily had all that many, extremely high stakes games. And he's been to a couple game sevens throughout his career, the one against Toronto in 2019, last season in 2023 against the Celtics, but we've sort of been lacking, those real career signature performances. And obviously the 70-point game is extremely memorable and is one that is going to go down as one of the greatest in his career. But I do think that this game was sort of on par with that as well, where he scores 19 points, he hits tons of big shots for them, and it was really cool finally getting to see Embiid, and again, that talent that we all know that he has, and put it to, I wouldn't say put it to good use necessarily like he doesn't normally, but having that come through in these massive moments that it feels like at 30 years old, we should have had a number of these big time Embiid moments. And here he was for Team USA with their backs against the wall, and that he was able to, anytime they needed to lean on him, he went out and he got tough buckets. And, especially too, we saw him flying around a little bit more. That baseline dunk that he had in the second quarter was probably the most explosive play that I think I've seen from Embiid in what feels like years. Just the way that he got up, he's diving all over the place, and maybe not quite as much on the flopping end, which we have seen from him at times, but legitimately just hustling. And I know that some people are sort of knocking him for some of the rebounding stuff. I don't fully put that on Embiid. You look, there was definitely, the U.S. was losing the battle on the glass in those final few minutes. That became a concern, but ultimately, Embiid's standing there, and he deserves maybe some of the blame, but he's also standing there with 3 blue jerseys a number of those times, and he didn't really have all that much help in terms of the rebounding portion. So an excellent game from Embiid. But speaking of rebounding and speaking of him not having help, what would have helped out Team USA to grab some extra rebounds there is Jayson Tatum playing, which he did not once again in this game. And, maybe a guy that averaged 10 rebounds per game en route to winning a championship just a couple months ago. That probably seems like something that could help out on the rebounding front for Team USA. And I just don't understand how there are 0 minutes available for somebody who is, 6'8", 6'9", can play really good defense and provide good rebounding. And again, this is something that Steve Kerr has talked about in the past, that he just didn't see the matchup necessarily favorable for giving Jayson Tatum minutes here. But like I talked about, the defense was a little bit of an issue for Team USA, especially on the perimeter, just not being able to get up and contest these shots, and the discombobulation that was taking place in terms of the assignments up top. Jayson Tatum, I think, definitely could have impacted that in a positive way. Now, when you talk about Jayson Tatum and him not getting minutes, the natural question is, well, who is he going to play over? And I think that it's obviously important to remember that everybody on this roster is incredible. And it's not necessarily a slight to them if they were to get their minutes reduced a little bit in order to make way for a player like Jayson Tatum. But, I specifically am looking at Devin Booker, where, again, not trying to bury him by any means, but 6 points and 1 assist in 24 minutes played, took just 4 shots. Now, give him some credit. He was the other half of that 6-point possession, along with Kevin Durant knocking down the three late in that, with around the 7-minute mark of that fourth quarter. So he had a big moment for himself without a doubt. But after that shot, the final 7 minutes of the game, he was pretty much invisible. And when he was noticeable, it was that Nikola Jokic was trying to punish him defensively and take him in the post. And ultimately, again, USA comes out with a win here, so I don't want to, make a bigger deal out of it than necessary. But at the same time, I sort of look at the way that this all went down and that the U.S. was struggling with rebounds. With just a few minutes left, there was the offensive rebound that set up the Serbian wing on the perimeter for a wide open three, and he couldn't hit it. It's a different game if that goes down, and it was generated because Serbia grabbed multiple offensive rebounds, 3 or 4, in that final 5-minute stretch. And I just think that Jayson Tatum could have been better in terms of filling in the supplementary role than Devin Booker, what he was able to give. Now, again, don't want to slander Devin Booker by any means. I just feel like it was a misplay by Steve Kerr. And Booker, I understand he's a more reliable three-point shooter than Tatum, so maybe the argument is that Serbia you wanted them to actually space out a little bit better and not have Tatum, who's struggling with his jump shot, sort of standing in the corner and having his man double teaming. But I can't imagine Serbia would be totally willing to give Jayson Tatum any shot he was hoping for, and I thought it was a mistake on Steve Kerr with how he played this out. But let me know how you feel about that in the comment section. Some notes here on Serbia, though. I definitely didn't have Bogdan Bogdanovic becoming a heel on my bingo card for this game. He was talking trash to Carmelo Anthony. He was doing the 3 to the head. He at least had the offense to back it up, is the thing. 20 points in the game. So, respect to him for talking that talk. But that being said, as somebody who was rooting for Team USA, it was maybe a little bit, I didn't hate watching, I should say, Bogdanovic missing shots, the turnovers, and having Serbia sort of fall apart at the end there. LeBron also hit him with the too small, touching the floor in that second quarter, so that was pretty funny as well. But Serbia, they were in this game because of their three-point shooting, and ultimately they weren't able to close it out because of their three-point shooting as well. Like I mentioned, 15 of 30 from the three-point line through the first 3 quarters, 0 of 9 from 3 in the fourth. So that is ultimately, and they got good looks as well in the fourth, but the law of averages just sort of came crashing in and caught up with them. Other notes here, though. Put some respect on Nikola Jokic's defense. I think that a lot of NBA fans are sort of under this impression that Jokic is a negative from a post-defending standpoint, but I can't say it's fully to the credit of Jokic, but Team USA was really struggling to get in the paint and score in the half court during this game. It wasn't really until the fourth quarter where they were running out in transition more to be able to actually get some good looks at the rim, and I do think that Nikola Jokic is responsible for that. He also had that sequence where he blocked LeBron at the rim, then came down on the other side and ended up getting the and one. I just feel like it was also so cool. So, Jokic, we already know he's great. I mean, this would have been the ultimate feather in his cap in terms of the overall pantheon of where Jokic stacks up all time, even though I don't think that him losing this game hurts him by any means. But I thought it was really cool getting to see him, and it's not just him. I think in general, we're seeing the passion that comes with these Olympic Games and playing for these players playing for their countries. I think just means something different, which is it was really cool to see it from Jokic, who's typically so stoic and doesn't necessarily show emotions like that. This was a very emotional game, and I just thought it was so exciting, and it's part of why I'm so excited about the possibilities of the globalization of basketball, because we just saw different levels. It just means something more to these players, especially from the European countries, where they have just a different sense of pride, in my opinion. And I think that also when you just look at the way that this is all baked in, it's the level of pride for your home country, the do or die setting in these elimination games. The stakes just feel so high, and definitely a different vibe to it in comparison to these 7-game playoff series that we have in the NBA. So I thought it was really exciting to watch all of this go down. I was obviously rooting for the U.S., but I love that they were challenged, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the continued development of basketball overseas and having the U.S. be tested maybe a little bit more moving forward here. But the U.S. does officially knock off Serbia, and they are going to be advancing to face off against France in the gold medal game. So I'm going to dive into the France game versus Germany. Another little bit of a surprise there, as France has been on a little bit of a Cinderella run up to this point. So we are going to dive into that matchup as well and preview a little bit of what that gold medal game will look like between USA and France. So we are going to be diving into that. But first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, no, this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose, if it's some moosey shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we just finished up recapping the semifinals game between Team USA and Team Serbia in the men's basketball tournament. On the other side of the bracket, we had another little bit of a comeback between France and Germany. Germany got out to a hot start in this game, led for practically the entire first half, and then it was France from there on out, as it was just really exciting to see as well. You know, for whatever it's worth, there's all of these ideas about home cooking and France maybe getting a slightly more favorable whistle, but you know, take that sort of out of the picture. It is really cool to see the fan base of France sort of, you know, supporting their team so heavily. Gershon Yabusele getting his MVP chance was just such a funny thing to me, especially as a Celtics fan, seeing Gershon, and, you know, give Gershon his credit as well for what he has been able to do over the course of these past couple games for France. 17 points and 7 rebounds in this game against Germany. He absolutely took over in the first few minutes of that third quarter, was getting his MVP chance after grabbing an offensive rebound and putting it back for an and one. This is coming off of a 22-point performance versus Canada, which was another upset as well. So France not necessarily expected to be in this position, but Yabusele, since moving into the starting lineup, has been a very important part of it. And just the way that he's been such a prominent, well-rounded player, I would have never imagined from what we saw from him years ago now during when he made his debut in the NBA with the Celtics in 2016, I think it was, and to have him, or 2018 is when he ultimately made his debut, but he was a part of that 2016 draft. So, it's been a little bit of a long time coming here. Now 28 years old for Yabusele. Did actually make some comments about tell the Celtics to pick up the phone to bring him back in. That would be a pretty funny development there. Don't think the Celtics have much financial flexibility to make something like that happen. But, definitely very fun to watch Yabusele and what he's been able to do up to this point in the Olympic run. Victor Wembanyama, everybody's pointing to the efficiency, and I do totally understand that it has been a little bit of a rough stretch of a couple games in terms of Wemby's scoring. Just 11 points on 4 of 17 from the field in this one. 1 of 8 from 3. Now, granted, that 3 that he did hit coming at a pretty important time with a few minutes left for France trying to hold on to their lead at that point, but also missed a clutch free throw in there as well. So we talked about this before. The offensive side of Wemby's game is still raw at times. Now you see him with the ball, the bounce pass that he made, the little backhander around a defender to a cutting Yabusele for a layup then, or I think he ended up getting fouled and going to the free throw line. But that was an absolute dime, and I still think that it's for Wembanyama trying to fully get control of his body almost to some degree, standing at 7'4" with that wingspan. I mean, it's tough to be, fully polished from a coordination standpoint, just based off of, human physics. So taking some time a little bit for Wembanyama, but still think that just the presence that he has, especially on the defensive side of the floor, is so impactful. Another 3 blocks for him in this game, and just makes everything so difficult at the rim, where we saw, Germany wasn't necessarily scared of going at Wembanyama. They tried him a number of times, but I thought that Wemby looked a little bit more comfortable as the game went on. He was able to help shut down, or at least be a part of shutting down, Franz Wagner, who was... I think that ultimately Franz still has a bright future. He even himself had a big-time three-pointer with a couple minutes left in that game, but his specialty is being able to attack on the drive, and thought that France did a really good job of sort of taking that aspect of his game out of the picture, and Wemby was definitely a part of that as well. And then Cornier is the forward for France that ended up being actually a massive, part of the run that they had, especially coming out in that third quarter. Just very hard-nosed defense, had the three-point shot behind him a little bit. I was very impressed by his performance as well. And overall, with this French team, again, sort of punching above their weight class to some degree. Germany is a team that I believe they won gold last year in the FIBA World Cup, and they have a ton of experience. Then Canada, another one of the top competitors coming into this year's Olympics, and it has been really impressive to see what France has done. Obviously, subplot to this whole run for France is the absence of Rudy Gobert in these last 2 elimination games. Just 3 minutes versus Canada, 5 minutes in this game versus Germany. Goose eggs across the board for the most part for Gobert's stat line. Only recorded 1 rebound and 1 assist. So seeing the way that, and this is something that I was thinking about as well watching this game, is I am a believer that Rudy Gobert he should be a Hall of Famer, that the majority of his Defensive Player of the Year awards are justified, and that NBA fans sort of get on his case more than they should. But I feel that way. I'm so glad I don't have to regularly defend Rudy Gobert, that I'm not a fan of the Timberwolves or the Jazz, or just in general a Rudy Gobert fan, that I feel like I have a hard enough time defending Jayson Tatum as a Boston Celtics fan, of, sort of some of the online nonsense and propaganda that gets thrown out against them. Rudy Gobert fans, I feel like, have it tough, even though he's a great player. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, but man, I mean, this... And to be fair, Tatum just got 0 minutes played in his semifinals game. So, like I said, it's not exactly like I have a super easy job in terms of my fandom from that perspective, but Rudy Gobert, ends up again not being a prominent part of this France run, that France has even taken their game to another level since sending Gobert to the bench. But I would have to imagine that Gobert is going to end up having a much more impactful role for France in this upcoming game against the United States in the gold medal game, because we talked about this from when the Olympics first kicked off, that France is the sort of one team that can match up from a size perspective with the United States. And knowing, of course, Joel Embiid, I feel like he... In the NBA, his reputation is being able to get to the free throw line a lot. I feel like that hasn't necessarily been the case so far with the FIBA rules, but between him, Anthony Davis, Bam Adebayo, that is a front that's going to put a lot of pressure on the whatever team they play. And I feel like especially against France here, knowing that Wemby is the, sort of final line of defense there, I think that a lot of these guys are probably going to want to test Wembanyama to some degree and sort of see what he's made of. They obviously have gotten, they're a little bit of a share of him during the NBA season, but it's just different stakes right now. And I feel like, especially, the likes of a LeBron, they're going to test Wembanyama. And I think that Wemby is going to need some help. And they've been going to this other center who's been playing fine for them in Lesort. And Rudy Gobert, I think, is going to have to take on a bigger role. It doesn't feel like, at least to me, that the U.S. offense right now is quite as, set on getting the switch and isolating like we see a lot of NBA teams do, that they sort of try and play with a little bit more rhythm. So Gobert, yes, we know when you pull him out on the perimeter, it can get a little bit dicey for him at times, but I don't think that that's the way that the U.S. is necessarily going to go about it. I'm fascinated to see how the Gobert minutes end up shaking up in this gold medal game. And obviously, he's dealing with this finger injury as well. That is at least part of the reason why he isn't getting quite as many minutes. But at the same time, the France is going to need all the size they can get for this matchup. And I think that it is going to be really interesting to see how this shakes out. And I think they said on the broadcast, it's the first time since, I think they said 1996, that the hosting country has medaled for the basketball tournament, which is pretty cool as well. Again, a lot of people may be upset with the whole idea of home cooking. After the Japan game, I get it especially, but since then, I can't complain all too much about it, but we will see whether or not home cooking, that idea, would be enough to dethrone the United States for their game. So definitely looking forward to that one. It tips off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern tomorrow afternoon, so Saturday afternoon. Should be a lot of fun to see how that one plays out. And we talked about the idea that Jokic, if he were able to pull off that upset, it would, really help solidify one of the all-time personal runs from Jokic, winning 3 of 4 MVPs and being able to take down Team USA in the Olympics. That would be sort of the feather in the cap it's almost on the other side here, where Wembanyama, he is currently emerging, and if he were able to help be a massive part of France upsetting this U.S. team, it would be, a launch pad for the conversations that he's going to be put into. I mean, a lot of experts, it feels like, are already sort of slotting him into that top 10 player slot. I'm still a little bit hesitant. He's going to have to prove it. I think he's more than capable of it as time moves on here, but I'm not, jumping prematurely to put him into that top 10 conversation. But he's knocking, and if he and France are able to, do what feels like impossible and beat Team USA in this game, we're going to have some crazy conversations headed into next NBA season. But let me know what your thoughts on this game were in the comments section. Definitely be sure to drop your predictions in the chat as well. But we are now going to be taking our next break here. And when we come back on the other side, I am going to be looking into each of the preseason games that took place last night, starting off with the Patriots versus the Panthers, where we saw the debut of Drake May. We'll give some thoughts on that, as well as the other key players that played for the Patriots definitely actually were willing to put out some of their starters a little bit more. So we'll dive into that whole conversation. But first, a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we are now going to be taking a look at the NFL preseason games from last night. Both the Patriots and the Panthers faced off, as well as the Giants and the Lions. So we're going to be starting in Foxborough with the Patriots game. Obviously, yes, preseason games, stakes aren't all that high, but football's back, and I do want to sort of highlight as much as we possibly can. This was the first time that we have seen a Patriots-led team play a game without Bill Belichick in over 20 years. 2000 was the last time that was the case. So definitely a different look in New England for whatever it's worth. Also a first-time look at a Dave Canales-led team. So two rookie head coaches facing off against one another. Definitely different approaches between the two of them. Very few reps for the notable Panthers. We'll try and highlight as much as we can there, but for the most part, it was more so the Patriots side of things, where we got a decent sample size of some players that could get significant snaps for the Patriots this upcoming season. So they did end up putting their starters out there, most of their starters out there, for the first drive on each side of the ball. It was our first look at Jacoby Brissett in the Patriots jersey since 2016. He only got one drive. It was not a very productive drive. The weather was crazy in New England in both of these games. The Northeast just been pouring rain lately, so both in this Patriots game and with the Giants as well, that we'll be getting into shortly. But Brissett 0 for 3 on the drive. I don't think that there is ultimately anything to really take out of this conversation and out of the sample size that we got that was very limited. Especially, and we'll talk about maybe a little bit of the Joe Milton hype that could be building up over the next couple weeks in New England. I don't think that there's anything Jacoby Brissett can do really to lose the starting job. I just think that he is overall going to be such a more polished and NFL-ready product or quarterback in week one. So much, it's not even just inexperience really, but it's a lack of, reliability that the Patriots have had the past couple years from the quarterback position between Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. So just feeling like Jacoby Brissett is a professional, that he's going to be able to protect the ball, and ultimately he's not going to be in New England long term, but I do think that he's sort of locked up that starting job for week one. But we did get our first look at Drake May as well in a Patriots uniform. Just one drive for him as well. Didn't lead to all that much. Was a 6-play drive. It was 3 run plays, 1 screen, 1 play action pass, and a check down. So Patriots were definitely trying to ease his way into the action. Weren't asking him to do all that much. Honestly, I understand different philosophies in terms of player development, especially at that quarterback position. Do you protect the player? Do you just sort of go out and let it rip? I think that for the first time ever, and Drake May talked about the fact that, yeah, he was feeling some nerves for this type of a moment, playing in front of what is a Patriots fandom that is maybe a little bit starved for an answer. And I know that's so dramatic. Tom Brady was just in New England a few years ago. If you are not a Patriots fan, you're probably saying, shut up. You had good quarterback play for 20 years. You can deal with a little bit of reset. And I agree with that philosophy, but unfortunately a lot of Patriots fans are impatient and obnoxious about it. So I think that it's going to take a little bit of time for Drake May. We knew that he was a project player coming into the NFL, and it would have been really nice to see more of him, but I also fully understand, especially in this type of a scenario where the Patriots have a bad offensive line as things stand in the first place, that on top of that, you're going to throw your franchise quarterback out there behind the backups. Things could get a little bit messy there. And again, they're just trying to ease their way into it with Drake May. So, can't take too much out of the performance. I was watching SportsCenter late last night, and somebody had asked the question of, what do you make out of Drake May's 3rd down screen pass for a 1st down? There's nothing you can really take out of it. But I did just mention the offensive line. I had a couple notes on that as well. It was an interesting starting group that they threw out there from the beginning. Projected starters in David Andrews at center, and then Michael Onwenu and Okorafor, who they just acquired in the offseason. They end up starting the 3 of them. Cole Strange still dealing with the injury that took him out, a knee injury at the end of the 2023 season that is maybe going to keep him out even through the beginning of the regular season. So we'll see sort of what happens there, but Michael Jordan started in his place, who I thought had a really rough game. But interesting that Michael Jordan started at guard, and they had Michael Onwenu at the other guard position instead of tackle, bumping Sidy Sow out of the lineup and Vidarian Lowe in at left tackle. Now, a lot of these names, obviously, if you're not a Patriots fan or you're not following the NFL quite that closely, these are a lot of names that, definitely are nowhere near household names, but I think that ultimately Sow is projected to be the starting guard for New England, and the fact that he was available in the game. He did end up playing later in the game, but didn't start. Thought that was a really interesting move. I don't know if Michael Jordan necessarily did himself any favors in terms of trying to earn that starting job, but I'm curious what the thought process was there for Gerard Mayo in terms of who to throw out there for the offensive line. again, I know I'm going a little bit heavy on the O-line talk, but we're talking about preseason. We're talking about the players who actually have a chance to play and what it could mean in the long term for the NFL. So we did see as well, again, talking about the Patriots, talking about an offensive line that has a lot of question marks. They did draft a few rookies in this past year's draft to try and slide into starting roles. Caden Wallace and Layden Robinson both got a pretty good amount of playing time in this game. They got experience on both the left and right sides of the offensive line, and I thought they both looked pretty good for the most part. Both of them allowed a couple pressures, so that's something that, maybe in pass protection, gonna need to improve a little bit there, but I ultimately thought that it was a pretty solid debut for both of them with the Patriots. I'm specifically looking at, I think that Caden Wallace probably has more of the need behind him, that if they started Vidarian Lowe at left tackle in this game, that's pretty concerning in terms of, they're eventually going to want to start Drake May, and Lowe was a little bit of a turnstile in 2023, so they're going to need an upgrade there, and Wallace could fill that. But Layden Robinson, especially if Cole Strange is going to be out for the next few weeks, that could end up being, a consideration for the starting spot, at least in Cole Strange's place while he's injured. And let's face it, Cole Strange also hasn't necessarily lived up to the first round pedigree that he was dealt in 2022 when the Patriots took him then. So could see a little bit of a competition there. But as I alluded to as well, Joe Milton ultimately did end up generating some buzz for himself, the 6th round quarterback selected out of Tennessee, and he looked pretty good, all things considered. The number one thing for him that clearly jumps off the screen with him is the athleticism. One of the first plays of the game for him, he scrambled around in the backfield for a good 10 seconds or so before getting upfield and picking up a 13-yard gain. He ended up throwing a touchdown as well to Jaquan Jackson, I think was his name, where great route for Jackson on that. Milton doing a pretty good job of looking off the safety and coming back to him. It's not like it was a throw perfectly in stride or whatever, but it was a wide open man. He hit him, made things simple, and ultimately they were able to score there. So pretty positive review, I would say, overall for Milton. And I think that ultimately when you look at where Milton is at as well, I am nowhere near ready to put him into quarterback one conversations, which I'm sure there are going to be a number of Patriots fans that sort of start to fantasize about that. But, Milton, the big thing for him is there was no guarantee he was even going to make this Patriots roster. As a 6th round rookie, definitely could have been cut, but ultimately, he's battling with Bailey Zappi for that QB3 spot. They have 4 quarterbacks on the roster right now. I would anticipate that they're going to cut that down to 3 for the regular season. And I think that Milton confidently should earn that, especially when you are just considering sort of what the upside of Joe Milton is in comparison to Bailey Zappi. You already sort of know what Zappi is, and Milton, again, all of the physical tools you could ask for from a quarterback, but the consistency of that arm accuracy is going to be massive for him. So we've been very Patriots heavy here. Again, unfortunately, the Panthers didn't necessarily throw all that much out there on the field to really analyze. For whatever it's worth, Dane Jackson was out there for the first couple drives for the Panthers. Jackson was acquired in the offseason, spent a handful of years in Buffalo that they now brought him into Carolina. It's a very inexperienced secondary. So he looked fine, I thought. Again, weather was really bad at the beginning of this game, so it's not like the Patriots' pass game was all that much of a threat. But, still solid. You'll take it, as opposed to him looking bad. That's kind of the case for a lot of these preseason situations. And then Dave Canales commented on the penalties. Wasn't super disciplined there from Carolina. Number of them on pre-snap. So things that need to be cleaned up there a little bit. But again, looking at a very different personnel picture for the Panthers when it gets to the regular season. So let me know what your thoughts were in the comments section. We're now going to be taking our next break and then diving into the Giants versus Lions game. So stick with us, and we will be right back after this quick break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we're now going to be looking at the other preseason game from last night in the New York Giants versus the Detroit Lions. So actually, we did just a couple minutes ago get a report from Ian Rappaport about the status of Drew Lock, who did start for the Giants. Not a great showing for him. Ended up throwing an interception on a third down. Was a pretty bad decision there going into double coverage. But he ended up going down as well with an injury at one point. And Ian Rappaport just tweeted out that he is dealing with, quote, a bad bone contusion and strained oblique from last night's game, that he is expected to miss some time, but no surgery is required, and that the Giants could look to add another quarterback in the meantime. Danny DeVito looked fine, for whatever it's worth, in the remainder of that preseason game, so feels like DeVito probably ends up becoming quarterback 2, at least for the time being. It's not like Drew Lock gave all that much to be really excited about with last night's game, but obviously just talking about a singular preseason game, hard to put all that much stock into that in comparison to what's been going on at camp. But the offensive line is obviously where the focus is on with the Giants, so I want to talk about that, but really what stood out to me even more so was the play of some of their young players in the secondary. We just previewed the upcoming season for the Giants earlier this week, and I was talking about the fact that I do like a lot of New York's front seven. The issue is going to be there's a lot of inexperience in that secondary, and that they are going to be likely relying on a lot of unprovens. But last night, looked pretty good from some of the key players. Deonte Banks, their first round selection from 2023, I thought that he looked really good. I was definitely interested to see what Tyler Nubin was able to give them. The Giants took him in the second round out of Minnesota in this past year's draft. And the number one thing, because I've watched limited film on him from Minnesota, the number one thing that stood out to me was his ability to step up in the run game. And that was definitely very apparent for me last night. Got in on a handful of plays there, even if they were just more so sort of in, helping out on other plays, maybe some combined tackles there. But Nubin, it sounds like as well with his draft profile, 13 interceptions during his time at Minnesota, that he can also be a factor in the pass game. So I would definitely be encouraged about what I saw from Tyler Nubin if I am a Giants fan. And then the other player that stood out was Trey Hawkins III, who the Giants selected in the 6th round in 2023, and I thought that he was also pretty impressive. Had a pass deflection, was also in on a couple tackles himself. So the three of them, between Deonte Banks, Tyler Nubin, and Trey Hawkins, I think that you can come out of that feeling pretty good about how it all played out in New York last year. These are all guys that are probably going to end up getting... Deonte Banks, without a question, is going to be the starter on the outside corner for the Giants. But, Newman and Hawkins, if they can end up at least just being playable options and serviceable options, I think that it's probably not a bad thing because, again, just a lot of inexperience in that secondary, and there are going to be opportunities for players, these young players, to sort of step up and make a name for themselves. So, that was something that was pretty encouraging for me in general. Additionally, diving into the offensive line conversation, but also just a little bit as well, the running back conversation, because for the Giants, you lose Saquon Barkley in the offseason. Feels like this is a team that the offense was so bad last year. If there were any positives, it was mostly in the run game, but it's a steep decrease, or downgrade, I should say, from Saquon Barkley to Devin Singletary, but ultimately got some pretty good production last night. Again, preseason, have to keep prefacing that there's, only so much stock you can put into it, but I thought it was a pretty good performance from the running back room for the Giants, where ultimately you see the likes of a Tyrone Tracy, who ended up giving you some good production, the patience of the run from, I'm trying to remember exactly which one of the running backs it was here. I have it in my notes somewhere here in regards to the run that was broken off for a touchdown. It was Eric Gray. And what Eric Gray was able to give you 2 touchdowns in this game absolutely shattered the ankles of Lions defensive back Maurice Norris for a 48-yard touchdown there on a halfback draw. So that was a pretty exciting moment there. And then again, you just talk generally speaking here with the Giants and what they were able to get out of their offensive line, and because of the we got some comments here from him. Great to see you. Thanks for joining in here. He said had to leave a chat for a while because of the Boston list. I see. Well, we are talking Giants right now, but definitely if you have any questions or anything along those lines, be sure to let us know what you're thinking. But just sort of talking up here these preseason games, really good production from the running backs, 27 carries as a whole, 155 yards and a couple touchdowns. Some nice efficiency, like I mentioned, from the big run from Eric Gray, had the other touchdown on a goal line opportunity. And then I thought that Tyrone Tracy looked pretty solid as well. And behind an offensive line that obviously we just talked about the Patriots and their struggles at offensive line, the Giants are sort of in a similar boat in terms of there's a lot of unknown in terms of what's going on with that offensive line. Made some moves in the offseason to try and add some depth there. So we got to see a couple names that the Giants invested into over the course of the offseason, and it was Andrew Stinney, I believe his name is, that he is projected to be a starter for the Giants this upcoming season. Aaron Stinney, my apologies. He played, and I thought that he looked especially good in the run protection in general here. I thought that he got better as the game went on. I really liked the pass blocking. Granted, he was playing right guard, so it's not like at a prime position for pass blocking, but I thought that overall Stinney was solid, somebody that's probably going to get significant playing time for the Giants. They also had a little bit of runway as well for Austin Schlottman, who was another free agent signing for the Giants offensive line. I thought that he was maybe a little bit weaker, probably not going to be a starter for the Giants long term, but ultimately I thought that the Giants O-line held up pretty decently for whatever it's worth. On the Lions side of this, they weren't necessarily running out quite as many players from a starting perspective. They didn't even pick up a first down for the entire first quarter, but I think that they were ultimately, it was fun watching Hendon Hooker get some runway. He ended up coming in for the second half. He at one point just straight ran through one of the Giants defensive backs. I thought that he was overall pretty good. Drive ended up stalling out in the red zone. Maybe a throw that could have been made, but ended up keeping it instead. And again, they just ended up getting shut down a little bit down in the red zone. But I thought that Hooker was pretty good. Definitely looked to be back to a little bit of his athletic self. Last time we really saw him extensively was, or at least myself personally speaking, was prior to the ACL tear that he suffered at Tennessee. So was good to see him sort of have a little bit of a bounce back there, but ultimately I thought that he was good. The other name that actually for the Giants I did want to highlight as well is Deontay Johnson. Made a number of pretty nice plays, linebacker for the Giants, and I was pretty impressed with ultimately, what he was able to give you for whatever it's worth. This is a linebacking core that I'm actually pretty high on, from Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden. And maybe you throw in Azeez Ojulari as well, as long as he can stay healthy. But Deontay Johnson was a pretty impressive performer for the Giants as well in that game, so wanted to give a little bit of love there. Malik Neighbors did make his Giants debut, didn't get on that much runway, 12 plays, 0 targets, so would have been fun to see anything there. You can say a little bit of the same for Terrion Arnold, the first round selection by the Detroit Lions. He at least played, the first drive or so, but not a lot of action on his end. So, again, we're talking about just so much with preseason, but it was a lot of fun, just that football is around the corner. Definitely really looking forward to the upcoming season. But if you had any other big-time takeaways, definitely be sure to share them in the comment section as we try and make the show as interactive as possible. But we are now going to be taking our final break of the show. When we come back, we're going to be previewing the upcoming season for the Washington Commanders. So stick with us, and we will be right back after this quick break. Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast for our final segment of the day, where we are wrapping up our previews of the NFC East teams. If you missed our other three, definitely be sure to check us out on either the YouTube page for the GSMC Sports Podcast or the GSMC Sports Network or the GSMC Podcast Network. But today we have the final team of the group in the Washington Commanders. And a lot of turnover for the Commanders headed into this upcoming season, starting at the top with head coach Dan Quinn, who they hired, former defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys. And I think that Quinn is a little bit of a bad rep, maybe just because of the fact that the Cowboys defense obviously fell apart during that Green Bay game. Some of the decisions in terms of playing really soft coverage and allowing these Packers young wide receivers to run around a little bit more ended up in a very ugly situation for the Cowboys, and the game was basically over before the Dallas offense even really got a chance to fully establish themselves. But if you take that sort of out of mind, Dan Quinn has been a good defensive coordinator for the Cowboys for years, and while I wasn't blown away with the signing by any means, I think that he can be a fine culture setter for Washington this upcoming season. And it's a lot of turnover, like I mentioned, as at the quarterback position as well. Despite Sam Howell flashing a little bit of something, maybe, probably not all that tangible, but thought that Howell had his moments. But ultimately, they decided that second overall pick, they didn't have a choice but to draft a new quarterback. So they end up taking Jayden Daniels second overall out of LSU. I think that I'm going to hold off on sort of, writing off Jayden Daniels by any means. We have to see what he looks like in the NFL. I am a little bit skeptical of what the upside for Daniels looks like, as he is a little bit of an older prospect. And I think that there's a very clear, he has the arm talent, he has the athleticism. The issue is sort of the extreme precision, and then also he needs to be a lot more mature in terms of taking hits, because at LSU he was setting himself up to get bodied on a number of instances. And it's possible. We've seen the likes of Josh Allen sort of have his welcome to the NFL hits and learn from that, but the difference is that Josh Allen has a lot more size to him. Jayden Daniels is a pretty skinny guy overall, so I think that he needs to do a better job of protecting himself when he makes this leap to the NFL. It's very much doable. It's probably one of the easier skills to sort of pick up on inherently, but something that I'm definitely looking at with Jayden Daniels. Not super positive on him, but I'm definitely open to, being talked into Jayden Daniels as a pro prospect. So definitely looking forward to seeing what he has. This is an offense that they bring in a lot of veterans, and not just the offense, but in general. We'll get into the defense as well, but a lot of experience. Now, unfortunately, experience can also come with maybe players that are past their prime. And that's what I would say the case is for Austin Ekeler and Zach Ertz. Now, while I don't love Ekeler in 2024 as a lead back, you also have Brian Robinson in the backfield as well to be a little bit of a reliable 1-2 duo, especially in the pass game. I think that Robinson has a pretty bright future, and Ekeler, we know for years, has been a solid pass blocker and has been a solid receiver as well. So I think that the Commanders did a fine job. Ultimately, you look at the weapons around them, Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, they're good options as well, but I do think that, look at a Zach Ertz and an Austin Ekeler. These aren't franchise pieces. The Commanders do still have a little bit of a ways to go. I did like the addition of Tyler Biadasz, former center with the Cowboys, that this is an offensive line that, to some degree, it was Sam Howell running for his life last year. Sam Howell also held on to the ball too long a number of times, so I think it was 65 sacks allowed last year. Not good whatsoever, but also part of that is a little bit of an error on the quarterback perspective. So I think that the overall pass blocking numbers are probably going to be at least slightly better for this upcoming season. So we'll have to see about that. But overall, you look at their numbers offensively from last season, pretty bottom of the pack across the board. Now, the pass numbers definitely up because the Commanders found themselves in some tough situations where they were having to pass their way back into games. I think that ultimately it's a fine offense. The offensive line is not, ready to be fully intact. I'm sure that's probably going to be the next direction that they go in on offense, to try and put some better linemen in front of Jayden Daniels. Again, I think the receivers are passable. I think the running backs are passable, but I do have some concerns with the offensive line. Looking at the defense, that's where, again, they bring in a lot of veterans, where they signed Bobby Wagner, they signed Frankie Louvu, Clennon Farrell, former first-round pick from the Raiders, giving A little bit of a fly on him as well. Dante Fowler Jr., Jeremy Chin. So these are all names that are probably going to be starting for the Commanders that are coming from other places heading into this year. And it's a new system anyways because Dan Quinn is now in town. So I think that it's probably fine in terms of a consistency of who you have, but and a cohesion on that note. But, I think that the front line is pretty good overall. Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen are both in, all-pro caliber players in their own rights. They bring in Jerzon Newton, who can also be a big-time game changer. They ended up drafting him, and I think he went in the second round, but, very possibly going to be the best defensive tackle out of the 2024 class. You get him in the second round, so pretty good value there, I'd argue. But outside of that, there's definitely question marks. I like Dorrance Armstrong. I think that's a good signing, another former Cowboy. But outside of that, I think there's a lot to be desired on the defensive side of the field. And you look at the numbers, 32nd in yards allowed, 32nd in scoring, worst pass offense in the NFL. It was pretty bad last year. Now, they have, I'd say, some intriguing pieces of the secondary where Emmanuel Forbes Jr. had a bad rookie season. It was not a good rookie season, I'll put it that way. And that, maybe there's some upside with him. Definitely not writing him off after 1 year, but out of the corners that were drafted last year, Forbes feels like one of the weaker ones. I like the draft pick of Mike Sandstrill a lot, though. Nickelback out of Michigan. I think that's a nice pickup for them, but it's a defense that definitely has a lot of room to grow from next year, but I think that this is probably going to be a little bit of a 2-year project for Dan Quinn to piece this all together. And the one thing I'd be a little worried about is what happens if some of these contracts that they just went out and spent on, if they don't live up to expectations. I think that they could get into a little bit of a financial problem. But pretty middle of the pack schedule, or strength of schedule, where you look, they're playing the NFC South, which you would think has a number of winnable games there, but the Commanders, again, I just think that ultimately this is going to be a little bit of a rebuilding year, and this season is going to be contingent on what does Jaden Daniels look like. You bring in Cliff Kingsbury as the new offensive coordinator. Is he able to sort of revive his NFL career by any means? Just spent last year, was it with USC, I believe? So making his return to the NFL, he hasn't necessarily proven all that much in the NFL, I don't think, at least just yet. So I think that this is a little bit of a wait-and-see season for the Commanders, and it's going to be mostly about internal development and evaluation. So ultimately, I have them winning about 4 games this season. I think that they are going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL, and that might not even be the worst thing in the world. That, them, and you look at the other records I've given out there. You look at them, the Giants, the Patriots. These are all teams that, the Giants are probably more so going to be in the quarterback market, but the Patriots and the Commanders, they both take a quarterback with their first round selections this year. Next year, it's probably going to be about offensive line and or a weapon. I'd say more so on the offensive line front for the Commanders in this case. But let me know if you are feeling, any more types of optimism about this season for the Commanders. It's not that I think that they are a bad roster by any means. I don't know overall here about the fit of everything, and I think that there are going to be some ugly moments for the Commanders. But again, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section. That is all the time we have for today, though. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. And we will see you same time as always on Monday afternoon, 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern. Have a great weekend. Take care.
go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.